the October council meeting. We'll start out by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any breaks on this?
I don't know.
And as I had done at the last meeting, I'll just go over the ground rules once again. If someone has joined us on Zoom, members of the public are encouraged to observe and participate in person while following social distancing protocol. The Zoom channel will be provided for those who are unable to attend in person. There will be no chat function. The following guidelines will be in effect. Public comment during the public comment period at the beginning of the meeting should be brief, limited to items not on the agenda, and used for making the council aware of a situation that needs some attention. The council would typically just receive the information and not engage in a dialogue. Public comment on a particular agenda item allows for a more thorough discussion. Those seeking to comment on an agenda item may do so after recognition by the presiding officer and may request recognition by raising their hand at the appropriate time. The Zoom hand raise function may be used as well. The council will no longer follow a roll call method for recognizing those that wish to speak. Members of the public seeking to comment during the in-person meeting will need to speak into a microphone and wear a mask so that the comment can be heard on the Zoom channel. All public comment periods are subject to reasonable time limits established by the chair based on the number of people seeking to comment, the length of the agenda, and the time allotted for the subject matter. So if we adhere by that, it would be appreciated. We'll now move into the agenda, and joining us for the first item, Chief Lamont, to discuss a few awards. Thank you for joining us, Chief.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for coming. The council members, members of the public, to include Mr. Munn, who is here to receive an award, the officers from the PD. Sorry to give him my back, but this is the way the camera is set up, and this is the way everything is standing. So just real brief, I'd like to take a minute to explain to those of you that are here in the council chambers, as well as Mr. Dominic Cloud, how the awards work for the St. Albans Police Department. The policy is relatively new to us. We want to set up so we had a consistent way to nominate people and to issue awards to recipients. So the way our award policy works is we have 6 categories for awards for officers within the police department. Those awards include the Medal of Valor, the Chief's Bravery Award, the Purple Heart Award, the Life Saving Award, the Distinguished Service Award, the Accommodation Award. We also have 2 categories for civilians. One of them is a Civilian Citation, and the other is a Chief Citation. These awards are not nominated solely by me or any other member of the department. They're pushed through by a committee that is made up of an officer from each rank within the PD. So there's an officer, a sergeant, a lieutenant, and there's also a member from our civilian side, being a dispatcher. They only decide who gets the awards. The way the nominations work is anybody can send up a nomination, from a civilian to an officer to myself, to a member of the council, to a member of the public. They send in a nomination, the committee looks at the nominations, they look at the requirements in the policy, what makes somebody deserve an award. They weigh the parameters within the award, and they decide if they are worthy of it. And they meet together, they take a vote, and the chairman lets me know if the award should be issued to this person. In this case today, we're here for two officers for an award and 1 civilian, Mr. Munn. I don't foresee us getting together for multiple awards in the same night that often. But we are here. These happen very close together. These all happen in July, so that's why we're here tonight. These awards it's great. It's great for the department. It's great for the community. We're a proud community. We're a dedicated department. We're a dedicated community. I was speaking to Mr. Munn really brief before we got here. I've never met him before or his family. But just speaking to him, he's lived in the same apartment building. He takes it upon himself to interact with the public, and He's more or less a caretaker, not for the department, but for the people, and that's great. And what he did that night, and I'll read it to you, is a credit to himself and to the community, and him having all his family members with him is great. It goes to show that they're here in support of him, he's in support of the community. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to call up each of the recipients of these awards in order, in no particular order, have them come up and receive this award on behalf of the police department, on behalf of the community. Mr. Munn, I'll read to you what he's getting. This award being issued to Mr. Munn is called the Civilian Citation Award. The definition for this award is, this award shall be presented to non-sworn individuals, i.e. citizens or employees, whose actions result in the apprehension of criminals, life-saving, or assisting the department in combating crime. Civilian citations may be processed by either the Sworn Awards Committee or Non-Sworn Awards Committee. This comes with a certificate of accommodation. Mr. Munn, do you mind stepping forward, please? And I'll read what is going to be on your award. The St. Albans Police Department's Civil Citation. On July 26, 2020, there was a reported domestic altercation at an apartment complex in which Mr. Munn lives and takes upon himself to help oversee. During this event, Mr. Munn could hear a female telling a male to get away from her. Mr. Munn was hearing this from outside the apartment. Believing this was related to an earlier incident in which he witnessed a male and female arguing, he knocked on the door and intervened. He escorted the female to his own apartment where she complained of having been strangled by the male. Mr. Munn secured the female until help in the form of the police and rescue arrived. On July 30th, within a couple of days of this, Mr. Munn again was involved in an incident with the same male who was reportedly suicidal and threatening to shoot others. The male was not displaying a firearm. However, the male was highly agitated and aggressive towards people in the area. Mr. Munn was able to isolate the male until police arrived on the scene. This involved holding the male against the fence. In both aforementioned incidents, Mr. Scott Munn had displayed personal courage in putting himself at risk for the sake of others. The St. Albans Police Department extends their gratitude for decisions and actions in these occasions. The St. Albans Police Department recognizes the efforts of Scott Munn. Sir, I appreciate your help and dedication to the community. And this is a small certificate. It reads exactly what I just read you for your work on those 2 nights, July 26th and July 30th, 2020. Thank you, sir. So just real brief on that, we as a police department are not encouraging people to put themselves in jeopardy or step into any type of dangerous situation to help others. However, there are times when people do that. Everybody in this room has probably had the opportunity to do that. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. And I'm not judging or criticizing. I'm just saying we're not encouraging that action. But if somebody does do that, bring it to our attention, because not everybody does. It takes a lot of courage to do that, to help your fellow human being. And there are times that people do it, and we'd like to know about it. But again, we are not encouraging it or asking people to do it. The next award we're going to give out is to Corporal Zachary Koch. This award that Mr. Koch is getting on behalf of the police department happened on July 29th, and I'm going to read to you what he is getting. Zachary Koch is getting an Accommodation Award. This award may be given by the Award Committee upon confirmation by the Chief of Police in those instances where exceptional performance by an officer or non-sworn employee has been brought to the attention of the committee. It may include all types of performance considered above normal or those instances indicative of exceptional ability in the handling of a police problem or community issue. It may include such items as suggestions for improving the department or in the case of a department member, notable action that is above normal routine and expectations of an employee to include exceptional work on a particular incident. This comes with a certificate of accommodation. Corporal Koch, please stand up and be recognized. On over. I'm going to read this exactly how this is written, and then I'll give him his award. On July 29, 2020, it was reported that a male was on the roof of the multi-level parking garage in the center of St. Albans City. It is further reported that he was having suicidal thoughts and was threatening to jump off the roof. Officers from the department responded to the scene in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Once on scene, Corporal Zachary Koch took the initial lead in speaking to the despondent male. At this time, the male was seated on the wall that surrounds the roof with the legs and feet hanging over the ledge of the roof. Corporal Koch was able to effectively speak to the male and persuade him to come back onto the roof. In the month of July 2020, Corporal Koch had responded to 2 males who were having suicidal ideologies. The male mentioned above and the second male who had attempted suicide just moments prior to Corporal Koch's arrival earlier in the month. In both situations, Corporal Koch displayed his professionalism, attitude, knowledge, and empathy to converse with these distraught individuals that led them to having calm, extended conversation with associated services. The St. Albans Police Department benefits greatly from this type of community policing effort. The St. Albans Police Department recognizes the efforts of Corporal Zachary Koch. Zachary, we have for you accommodation as well as a photo of you and that individual on the ledge. And that's what it looked like when he got to the scene, for those of you that haven't seen it. And the individual can't be recognized, that's for showing it. Sitting on the ledge of the building. Thank you. The last award we have tonight is going to Christine Cook. Same spelling, different pronunciation. Christine Cook has been honored with the Life Saving Award. The Life Saving Award is an award presented to an officer for saving the life of a human, intended for all officers directly responsible for the saving of human life in instances involving fire, potential drowning, medical emergencies, vehicle accidents, and miscellaneous rescues and suicide prevention, where the sole action of the officer was life-saving act itself. This will come in accommodation as well as a bar that will be worn on her uniform. So this will be put on after tonight's ceremony and be worn whenever she's in uniform, so it can be recognized by all the other officers and people in the public. Corporal Cook, please step forward and be recognized. I'm going to read this exactly how it's written in here. The St. Albans Police Department Life Saving Award. On July 18, 2020, St. Albans Central Dispatch received a call regarding a 1-year-old infant who was reportedly not breathing. As dispatch notified the rescue, they also notified St. Albans Police Department officers. Corporal Christine Cook was one of the officers who urgently responded to the residents, arriving within 1 minute of the initial call. On arrival, Corporal Cook exited her car and was immediately handed the infant who was unresponsive. Corporal Cook cradled the infant and administered life-saving techniques, which resulted in the infant regaining motion and beginning to breathe once again. Rescue arrived moments later and subsequently transported the infant to the hospital. The immediate life-saving actions of Corporal Cook were pivotal in the victim's survival and ultimate recovery. Corporal Cook's efforts in the incident are a great representation of her dedication to the department and community of St. Albans. The St. Albans Police Department recognizes the selfless and heroic efforts of Corporal Christine Cook. Christine, congratulations. Thank you. Real quick on Corporal Cook's Life Saving Award. I've touched base with the mom and the little boy twice now. He's doing great. He's running around like a 1-year-old does. Both times I spoke to mom, she starts crying the second I get to the door. Never let I start talking to her. And she immediately goes into, oh my God, officer, she calls her officer. Officer Cook saved my baby's life. And she goes up, tells me the whole story in detail from start to finish both times. So that's the type of thing that you don't get very often in this job. And it's a great testament to her and everybody else at the PD. Just the fact that she got there, I think the actual time was like 46 seconds from the time the call came in to the time she was on scene. And we watched the video and she went right into action on it. Great job. You don't get those very often in your career, and when it works out the way it did, nothing else is better. So I'm very grateful for that, as is the family. That concludes our awards ceremony for tonight. I realize it's COVID, it's quick, it's in and out. I'd like to offer more, but that's the way this is in these times. But I'd really like to thank everybody for coming. Mr. Munn, I appreciate you coming in. I appreciate your family showing the support to you and for you showing support of the community. All the officers that came tonight, I thank you. These awards should be given out when stuff like this happens. You too. Zach, you're doing a great job with everybody. The way you treat these individuals is not new. Since I've been here, you've been doing it. You're very, very good with empathy and talking to people that are having mental health crisis. You're great at it, and you do a really good job at it. Christine, doesn't surprise me, that's exactly what you did. Probably won't be the last time or something like that. I thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Munn, on behalf of the council, we want to thank you for your efforts. Thank you for everything you've done. We thank you for being a citizen of St. Albans City. We greatly appreciate your efforts, and we want to, on behalf of all the council, we want to thank you for that. So,
Thank you.
thank you. As for Corporal Coke and Cook and the entire police department, as a council, we were privy to see the interaction on the parking garage. We were very impressed with the way it was handled. We know this is difficult times to be a police officer, but I would like to say to all of you that on behalf of this council and myself, that we truly appreciate all of your efforts, and we will continue to support you every day that you're on the job. So thank you. We greatly appreciate all of your efforts, and we look forward to a good year moving forward. So thank you very much. So, Chief, you're up again regarding the role of the SRO.
Yes. Okay. Would like me to start in?
Go ahead.
Okay. So the SRO, when I took this position, in the acting chief's position, one of the very first meetings I came to, and it was more of a Zoom meeting in the other room, one of the common concerns I heard from the PD is that we weren't doing a great job of giving all the citizens a voice. And it kind of struck a chord with me, because one of the things that we had been talking about, one of the things we keep hearing is procedural justice. And one of the big things about procedural justice, one of the 4 pillars, is giving everybody a voice. So it was brought up a couple of times, one of the communities that aren't getting a voice here are economically disadvantaged people, and people are living on the street, homeless, living in state housing, which is being housed here. A lot of state housing is being housed here, and people with mental health illness, which goes hand in hand. So it definitely bothered me, it bothered others at the PD, and we're trying to figure out how we could become more involved. And one of the things we decided to do, I decided to do, I guess, was revamp a little bit of our SRO program, and we changed the name a little bit to Community Support Unit. We're taking our SROs, primarily right now as a pilot. We have 3, one of which was here tonight. Christine Cook is one of our SROs. Community Unit is what they're called, Community Support Unit. And those 3 individuals are spending some of their time in the streets. And primarily Wednesdays, they are hooked up with other resource agencies in St. Albans, NCSS primarily. NCSS, Samaritan House, Martha's Kitchen, the Phoenix House, and we're trying to get a way in to talk to that demographic. And what we've done at this point is we laid the groundwork. We've had multiple meetings with that group, meaning those other resource agencies, with Martha's, Meals on Wheels, NTSS, Samaritan House, to see how we could get our foot in the door to talk to that demographic without ruining the relationships those groups have already made. So at this point, we've had the meetings. NCSS primarily has taken the role of laying the groundwork to let that demographic know that we are going to be coming in to a lot of the homeless shelters. We're not there we are police. That's not a secret. We aren't there in a police role. We aren't there going to calls. We're walking in a different role. We're there to be their liaison. We're there to offer support. We're there to find out what they need, what more we can do. They aren't wearing uniform when they're there. They're dressed down uniforms per se have been ordered. One of them, Corporal Cook has hers. The others hopefully will have them this week, so we can hit the ground running. But the whole idea of this is, again, procedural justice is huge in this, and I'm trying to look at my notes, that's why I'm looking down, but we want to treat people fairly, we want to be transparent, we want them to have a voice, and we want to be impartial in decisions. I mean, those are the 4 big tenets of procedural justice, and I think this starts with this group, and we can grow from it. But when we started this, we really wanted to lean on NCSS and Samaritan House because they're good at making connections, and I think they can show us the way. We're working it out. They've been prepped. We're going to go into these areas. We've made up some flyers. What we were told was one of the biggest things we run into when our officers end up at these locations for calls, which is quite common. We get asked, where can I find this? And I'm going to use some examples. Where can we find housing? Where can we find more food? Where can we get rides? Where can we find economic services? We don't have all those numbers. We don't have the way to get all those numbers. We can flip through all the business cards we want, but So one of the things we were told was a great idea by one of the other resources is, what if we had a booklet that had everything in it? So we've got one made up now that we have. We're gonna be able to hand those out. We're trying to come up with ways to liaison some of this stuff. We want to be more of the point person, at least one of the point people that has ideas of how to help this group of people. We want to come up with a way to walk in and they can vent to us, they can talk to us, they can say, hey, I have whatever it is, I have court coming up. Can you help me figure out how I go about this part? Because that's a big part of this, of the problem with some of this is you don't know what's coming next for you, and you're frustrated. And when you see police, you're frustrated by them not having the answers. So that's one of the things we've had, and they're going to be able to hopefully give them some answers on the legal system. And that's been one of the things they've dealt with already when they've been there, and that's going to help. But the biggest thing is we want some FaceTime. So when we show up, right now we're going to these places because there's a large congregation of people there. We show up and it's for a call, and they all know it's for a call. And we're not welcome with open arms, I guess you could say, and we're trying to change that. Trying to change the persona perception that we can show up, particularly if we're not in this uniform, we're in a different uniform, and when we're there in the other dressed down uniform, we are there in a different capacity. You can walk up to us, you can have a conversation, you can ask us for help, you can ask us for advice, you can just tell us stuff, and that's what we're trying to do. And I think with that knowledge, with the people having that knowledge, they can talk to us. The officers are going to learn so much. The other agencies are going to learn so much. We're going to build a team that's going to consist of all these resources. And with that, it falls into the whole concept that the more you interact with people, the more positive their actions are, the better you treat the public, both when you're there on calls, when you're not. It directly shapes the way the public view police, and it has a direct correlation on the way public safety is in the future with that same population. And that's the way we're going to grow it. The only way we're going to do it is to step in and be there often. And this is where we decided to start, was with this community, this demographic, because that is a large demographic in St. Albans right now that we can easily identify, easily find. Some of the other groups we heard that we weren't listening to them. They're not quite as easy to locate right in one conjugated location, and this group is. And we're going to try it. We're going to try this. And right now, we're getting so much praise from it, from the people that are involved, mostly resource centers. They think it's a great idea. They're offering all kinds of help, and they're guiding the way on how to make these relationships. And the three we have in this unit couldn't be better. They are ones that want to do it. They see the positives in it. They are coming up with some great ideas on what to say, what to do, what to bring. They were delivering Meals on Wheels last week. These three were. It's all good stuff. They're not going there because I forced them there. We started talking about it, and it just turned into a real positive conversation, and they just want to do it. So I think it's hard to say which direction it's going to go or how fast it's going to go. I just think right now we need to get in the door. We need to see what that demographic wants from us and what more we can offer. We have some really good help from other resource agencies that want to do it, and they're pushing us with ideas. It's just we can only go as fast as people are willing to receive us in that community. That's basically what we can do. And we're going to keep going. Right now, Wednesdays are our day when we're going to be there. And if they request something that we can do, then we'll bring it back the following Wednesday or before if we can. Those officers work primarily within schools, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, but it doesn't mean they're locked there. They're tied there. So hopefully we can get them out if we have to, but that's kind of it in a nutshell. It's following the four pillars of procedural justice. It's starting with this group. We'll move it on to other groups, but this is kind of a good place to start because, again, it's a large number. They're easy to locate, easy to see them in one place. They're all decent, really good people that just need a little bit of helping hand. A lot of them have unfortunately had interactions with police that may have not always gone positively. A lot of them are from Chittenden County, so they don't know us at all. So it gives us a really good chance to try this with a clean slate with the St. Albans Police Department. I think it's going to work out great. But that's it in a nutshell.
Chief, I had a few questions.
Absolutely.
You had mentioned Corporal Cook being one.
Mm-hmm.
You may have mentioned, who were the other two?
Garant is another one, and Kaylee Cataract is the third one.
You talk about resources. United Way used to produce a resource book.
They do, and we have that. We have a few resource books. Some are outdated, some are not. They all need to be updated, though. Everyone we found has stuff that no longer exists or contacts have changed. Yep. We also, one of them, the one I think United Way is the one we have on my desk right now that's probably 30 or 40 pages long. Right. So we need to cut something down to a 3x5 index card that's laminated. So it's not quite so much information. The requests we're hearing right now primarily are more instant needs, food, gas money, housing. It's really basic human needs, but the United Way book is excellent. It's just a little overwhelming, not overwhelming. It's more than what we're getting asked right now. And I want to be able to get those out to the officers who are working night shift, who are called to something at 2 in the morning and they're getting asked those questions right now. And the big book will be good for the the community sport team during the day when things are calm. But we're going to use this to be available to every shift. We're going to use the information they gather and come up with some resource books that can be used on every shift. More of an instant resource in the middle of the night or any time so they can find some help. Right now it's hard with COVID. We can't find resources to answer the phone anywhere. So we need to come up with some new updated information for 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning as well.
And then my last question is, I know many of the homeless are at the Cadillac Motel.
There's 2 hotels, yes.
Is there still encampments out and about that you're aware of that they're not utilizing the hotels?
There are a couple of encampments still out and about, yes. The state would like to see all encampments get moved into a hotel due to COVID. Right now, the Econo Lodge and Cadillac are both being used in Franklin County. Chittenden County has several. There are still some homeless individuals that would rather be out rather than in a hotel. Can't force them to come in from the outside, but there are a couple still in St. Albans area. And those are being visited as well.
Thank you. Questions from the council?
I just have a couple. Have you connected with Kristen Pryor on this?
So I've talked to Kristen she's in the meetings on Wednesday morning. There's a large meeting, it's all Zoom meeting. It's with like caring partners, and she's heard this talk. So she's one of the ones that's been involved in the conversations, but not directly one-on-one with her, no.
Okay, so she's a great resource because she can hook you up with a lot of stuff at the state office building.
Okay, yeah, there's probably been 30 to 40 people on these meetings on Wednesday that have kind of heard this, so I'm getting a lot of information from a lot of different people, so we're just getting off the ground, but everybody's been very good about throwing in their information.
And the other one you may want to connect with is Melinda White.
Melinda's very involved. She's probably one of the 2 most involved, and I've been friends professionally with Melinda for 5 years. So she's now part of the Phoenix House, so she's very involved.
She's fantastic. Thank you.
Yep.
Chief, is this the complete elimination of SRO in the schools as we know it?
No, this is just using their downtime. So Wednesday is a little bit of downtime for them because the schools aren't open for kids. The schools are being cleaned on Wednesdays. So we just had that time, and we just thought, no, I'm not at all taking away from the schools. If they need them on Wednesdays, we'll do something else with others. But Wednesdays for them just became, they weren't necessary to be at the school unless school has an event. But right now, Wednesdays, there's no kids there. So they had downtime on Wednesdays, and we're like, well, what are we going to do with these 3? And we had talked about the community support unit to begin with. Like, well, let's use that time for them. And they're just naturally, it made sense to me because they're involved in kids anyway. And some of these same kids, unfortunately, are involved in the same population.
Does this program limit the amount of time that the SRO would normally stay at the school?
No. If they're needed at school, they'll be at the school. And then if this has to happen after school hours, then it'll happen after school hours.
Thanks.
Marie?
I think it sounds wonderful.
Mike? Kate?
No, I agree with Marie. Great program.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would commend your chief being flexible and looking at new ways. That's something we've heard, obviously, and I think it's a great opportunity and it will be a great program. So, thank you for your willingness to look at it in a different way. Any other questions? Hearing none. Chief, thanks for coming in and on both counts, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
He's still here for the next one too, isn't he?
So the next one? Oh yeah, right. We have the internal affairs policy.
Mr. Mayor, I inadvertently left public comment off the agenda, but I knew you wanted it to be short, but not quite that short. So maybe you want to see if there's any.
Is there anyone either on the call or in the audience that has any public comments to share with the council? We're not seeing anyone, so We will move on from public comment and move to the consideration of the adoption of the internal affairs policy. Chief?
Okay, so the internal affairs policy, we made some changes based on last month's city council meeting. Would you like me, sir, to go down through the changes?
Let me take a, let's tag, the chief and I are going to tag team this. I'll take a run at it first, and then we'll share questions as they come in. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. The highlighted sections reflect all the additional areas. There's 8 of those. We think they're responsive to all the concerns that were brought forward. There were 2 areas that we didn't include. The most substantive of which is appeals, and it's important to remember. So we didn't add a section on appeals, and it's important to remember that the investigation by, in many cases, an independent third party is a technical review. It's a qualified professional who has qualifications that I don't have and the city council doesn't have. And so for us to provide an appeal of that determination really erodes the integrity of that process and everything that we're trying to provide by having an independent review gets wiped away. So we haven't included it. It's not typically included in a policy such as this. It would be the exception, not the rule, to add it in. And just imagine, you know, the most likely scenario here is somebody thinks that an officer used excessive or inappropriate amount of force, and they file a complaint and it's investigated, and that person doesn't like the outcome. If they're able to appeal it to the city manager or the city council, none of us have the ability, we would have the ability, none of us have the qualifications to second guess that independent opinion. And what typically, the way that person is made whole, redress is made, is financially, right? Because any personnel actions that are taken, that's between the chief and the city manager to work out. So if this person is aggrieved, they sue us. And that's the way it typically works, and they're able to get attorney's fees, and that's, you know, I hate to say it's the best practice, but it's certainly the common practice of how this is handled. So we haven't added in that section. There was also a suggestion.
Can I touch on that? Are you done with that?
Sure.
With the appeal, or you want me to wait till the end?
Just let me wrap up, and then we,
okay.
Yeah, and then we didn't add harassment because that's coming up next in the upcoming policy on fair and impartial policing and bias. So, Tim.
It just struck me odd reading that about the appeal, because usually when you talk about it, some type of administrative law,
yeah,
there's usually the appeal process through the agency first. And then once you've gone up to the top of the agency and you don't think you have the proper redress, then you go down to the court level. In this particular case, you talked about the federal court level. And they would go down to the district court and then up through that route. And to me, if there was a way to avert legal action and costs, it would be better for us to listen to the appeal than it would be for us to say a process has taken place and now your redress is now through the court system. Aren't we just begging the question to say, go after us if you think we've done something wrong? Or are we abrogating our rights or abrogating our duties to an independent body, and that independent body is the review council?
It's in large measure that, and it's the uniqueness of this type of claim, right? I mean, this isn't a DRB appeal, or a tax appeal. This is this is the exercise of force by a governmental power. I mean, it's that raw police power type thing, right? And it allows somebody to shop for an answer and puts the council in a position. You're going to, you know, do you undercut the chief? Do you undercut the manager? Do you?
I can understand the manager not being involved in the process because of the direct relationship with the chief, but not the council. So I guess I'm having a harder time with that. Not that I'm against this policy, but I was just surprised to see that the council wasn't there as the first level of appeal.
Let's play it out, right? Let's use a real example. Let's use Connolly, right? Connolly, Connolly's is I want to choose my words carefully because this is being litigated, obviously, but we've taken responsibility for that. There isn't a whole lot of material dispute of fact, right? But so Connolly is punched in the cell by an officer. Connolly, instead of suing, decides to come in and demand an investigation. Didn't happen, which is fine. In this scenario, we would hire an external investigation. So MRI comes in, and MRI issues their findings. And Connolly doesn't like the findings. Do you want that entire spectacle to then be shifted to the city council? Imagine that, right? And what are you going to do? Okay, we agree with you. We think it was too much force. Okay, city manager, fire the cop. Different scenario. We don't agree with you. We support the independent professional investigation. Now we're right, now we got Battery Park. I mean, the strength of the process is there's a whole training and methodology for training officers how to apply force. It's really complicated and gray, and so we hire an expert to come in and evaluate it, and then the chief and the manager dole out the discipline. And it just, you know, I can't imagine that turns out well if they can appeal the outcome to the city council. What would you know?
What would the mechanism be for the city manager and the chief if the council sided with the applicant or the aggrieved party? Is there one? Let's
specify the facts a little bit. MRI upholds the officer's actions. And you think MRI got it wrong, and you decide with, you know, the grievance, if you will, then I'm in one hell of a spot. Right? I mean,
isn't that the same way as if the zoning administrator does something and then the on an appeal, the ZBA overturns the zoning administrator's decision? Isn't the zoning administrator in a hell of a spot? Isn't it the same if the Attorney General a decision overrules a Vermont agency decision? I mean,
no.
Aren't they in a hell of a spot too?
No, because our charter says that the council can't tell the manager who to hire and fire, shorthand. A. B, the zoning administrator, the only process that exists is that it gets appealed to the DRB and they get to decide, and then it goes on to environmental court. But there isn't an independent opinion that's rendered, and there isn't this overlapping of personnel behavior, and you know, if the ZA gets it wrong, it's not because he punched him or misapplied police power, it's because he misinterpreted a bylaw. And, you know, so it's a different process. We don't have an independent body involved. And the mechanics are the things that we deal with every day.
I can see the council having to tell you to fire somebody would be problematic. Especially,
can't give them
especially
money.
Especially if you and the chief didn't agree with it, because that's not our job to do that.
Yeah, I mean, then you.
So I can see where that, so I didn't think about it that way.
That's the core issue.
Yeah.
What do they want? They want the officer fired, or they want money.
Mm-hmm.
Whether the officer stays or not, that's our job. And they can't get any money until our insurer comes in. And our insurer doesn't come in until it's in the court process. Right? You know, the relief they want, we can't give them.
Okay.
Mike?
So I think one of the things that we talked about, just to put a final point on that, a lot as we've been going through these conversations around police reform, is to try to keep the process apolitical, to keep it professional and not political. And I know that there's a desire from some people to create a civilian way for us to get into the kind of scraps that Burlington's getting into right now. And I don't want to be I don't want to be in a position as a civilian elected official on the council to be trying to adjudicate those kind of appeals. And I don't want to put us in that kind of position. And I think when people imagine what it would be like, they're not imagining how fraught that is to have the determination be done by people who don't have the qualifications or experience to make the determination. So I know there are going to be some people who are going to criticize us for saying that it's, you know, the decision gets rendered by that independent investigation, and then if you want to take it to the next level, it's going to court. But I think that's the right thing to do based on everything that we've talked about to date.
I would also think that you're only going to overturn MRI once or twice, and you're not going to have access to them anymore. You know.
Yeah.
I know there's others, but
Yeah.
I can't imagine you go through that process and then get overturned by the council. I don't think that would stick too well with them.
I mean, they're under the policy, there's, I think, 5 determinations they can make, right? And so that's the only relief that the council could offer, is making a different determination.
Employment law cases don't come easy because no attorney ever wants to take them. Why? Because they don't pay. I mean, how many employment law attorneys are there really in this area? 0.
Yeah.
You know why? Because clients don't come, because they don't have the money to pay us, because they're so expensive and they're so fraught with bureaucracy that it's very tough for us to take those and make any money. So no one does it. So if a person, and you're talking about federal law here, so number one, you have to invoke it. The person would have to invoke it. And if that person can't, or there's some reason that that person can't invoke it, then they're going to say, well, geez, I guess I'm stuck with that decision because I don't have the money to go and get an attorney to take this to court because he's not going to get attorney fees and I'm going to end up having to pay it and I can't afford it.
He is going to get attorneys, but Tim, I mean, you're obviously much more connected with the Franklin County Bar than I am, but my experience is that use of force claims are not rejected by plaintiffs' attorneys. You know, they're not Franklin County attorneys, but I think there's a very active practice area right now because of the potential for attorneys.
I have no problem with use of force claims.
Yeah, okay.
But it could be other claims that a individual would have.
But the 1983 applies to all of them. They're all due process claims in one way or the other.
Maybe not.
Right?
Maybe not. Okay, though. Okay. I just brought that up.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
So Don, what happens if, sorry, Mike, are you all done? What happens if you and the chief say, no, we don't think they're excessive use of force, but now the Attorney General gets a hold of it and they find that there is, and they're gonna litigate it.
So the chief and I wouldn't make that determination. The independent investigator makes the determination. Let's turn, what page is that on, Mo, in the policy? 9.
It's far back.
All right.
That's on there.
So, okay, just instead of you and the chief, MRI makes the choice, so you know.
So MRI comes back and says,
Reports it.
not sustained, exonerated, unfounded, sustained, or there was a policy failure. But they're not going to say, and based on that, we think they should have a 30-day suspension. That's what we do. The Attorney General gets involved when there's a crime, typically, or it's referred to the Attorney General to do the investigation. Sometimes that is what has happened. But here, what we're talking about is a more active involvement on our part and the ability to select the investigator and have it run through our process.
So I guess the question I'm asking is, what happens when MRI and the Attorney General, they have differing opinions, and the Attorney General brings a charge, whereas now we had an independent investigator say there shouldn't have been.
Exonerated.
Yeah, exonerated.
Yeah.
There's nothing. So they contradict each other.
Well, a lot of things happen. MRI exonerates them, and the Attorney General claims jurisdiction and prosecutes as a criminal matter. There are two independent trains that, you know, would move and would probably intersect at some point. You know, the Attorney General taking jurisdiction doesn't necessarily mean that the investigation ultimately bears fruit. But if the investigation bears fruit, then that would then flip over into our personnel policies. You know, you can't be a police officer if you're being charged by the Attorney General, and so then our disciplinary process would carry out. So, you know, essentially there's, you know, maybe a second bite at the apple there, but it has to be a pretty unique circumstance.
Can I ask one more question, Chief?
Mm-hmm.
Is
Absolutely.
excessive use of force in New York City or in Burlington, Vermont, and in Sheldon, Vermont, does that excessive use of force carry the same definition, the same meaning in all three of those places?
It should, well, for Burlington and Sheldon and St. Albans is all the same. We're pretty much using the same use
How about
of
New York
force
City?
policy. I don't know, I'm
How about
assuming,
Boston?
but I don't know what their use of force policy is, but.
Well, wait a
New
minute,
York
but
says-
aren't MRI people the Boston people?
They're
Greater Boston area?
Are you talking criminal-wise, or are you talking internal affairs?
Well, they're going to be on the panel here.
Yes, for internal purposes, excessive use of force, excessive use of force. For crimes in New York, they're simple assault, aggravated assault is different than Vermont, but for internal purposes, yes. Excessive force, excessive force, excessive force.
Has the same meaning
So,
across
yes.
the board, no matter where you
Yes,
are,
absolutely.
where you come
Yeah,
from.
I would
Okay.
assume it's exactly the same. In fact, most places are going to adopt the same use of force policy in Vermont, and Vermont normally mirrors most of New England, so yes.
Okay.
Any other questions on this topic?
Can I ask one, Tim? So I think one of the reasons that maybe the topic of appeals has come up is that people want a sense that if the way that MRI is handling things is not serving people well, there's some mechanism to kind of hold MRI accountable. And I don't know if that's part of this policy, but I'm just wondering how do we as a council, if we go through a year of this policy and we see nothing but exonerations, that might be a red flag that this process isn't working. What's the mechanism where we say, you know, we have questions about how these investigations are going.
So it could say that our training program has been enormously successful.
It could, and I will give you that. It could say other things.
But at any time, I think the council can say, you pass a motion at a meeting to look at it, or, you know, that's a formal way to do it, or you could, and that would get you immediate results, or you could incorporate it into our annual priorities review, you know, so it, but that's, you know, that's the job of the council, using the tools that are available in your toolbox. And a citizen who has that sentiment would need to persuade the council to take that action.
In terms of MRI, we will be using them on a case-by-case basis. We don't have a contract.
There's no contract with them.
So
No.
we would, as a situation comes up, call them up, say we would like to have you on board to do
Internal.
to check
Internal
out the
investigation.
situation.
Yeah.
And then if we don't like the outcome, or we don't like the way they handled it, or the attention they gave us, we just move on to someone else, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it's as easy as one and you're done.
Right. There are other companies out around here that do it.
So it's not like we're stuck with them for a year or 2 years.
No.
Thank you for that clarification.
I mean, generally speaking, there's probably some value and some continuity and
Yeah.
not bumping it around,
Right.
you know, sort of like your auditors type of thing, right? You know, but,
Once they make a decision, who are they answering to? Are they talking to the chief? Are they talking to you? Are they
Comes
coming here
in-
in front
it
of
comes
us,
into-
talking to us?
comes into the chief.
Comes into the chief?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And do we ever hear about it?
You hear about it in a couple of ways. You hear about it in the report that's filed, and there's a report out on these, which can be as often as we want, though at a minimum annually. And you hear about it through the manager, and just like you hear about all the other comings and goings of the
And
city.
is that public information or confidential information?
Under the policy,
On page 9.
Numbers of internals can be public, but like names and everything is not. The report shall also be made available to the public by using posts on the department website, and to employees by being posted on chief's information board, but not the names of the employees.
And do we hear it simultaneously with the public, or do we hear something first and then it goes to the public?
So the report's not going to be, the report to the public, like city manager is saying, that can be as annually, so if you want to hear it more often, you're welcome to.
So something can happen in February and we don't hear about it till December?
Depends if we want to make it so it's more routine for you to hear, if you want it quarterly, however we want to break it down.
so this isn't the end, this isn't the one document that guides our entire relationship. I mean, right? If the city manager doesn't tell the city council that there's a excessive force complaint, then you probably ought to be looking for a different city manager, right? That's my job, is to keep you guys in the loop.
So I'm not gonna get a phone call from the office from somebody up on Messenger Street saying, hey, Tim, how come Joe Schmo didn't get fired because of X, something happened, and it's the first I'm hearing about it?
What was the lead into that? You're not gonna, is that what you
Yeah,
said? Or-
that I'm not gonna know what's going on. That we're not gonna know what's going on, any of us.
Well-
Because we haven't heard it yet, because we're looking at these things quarterly or semi-annually or annually, and we don't know what's happening, but the general public does, because I'm sure the newspaper's gonna wanna know about it, or someone's gonna wanna know about it, and
But my guess is there's an excessive force, there's a need to bring MRI on. You're gonna send us an email or call, say, look,
Yeah.
MRI is coming on board to do an investigation on this case, right? I mean,
So I would point to the past as the best predictor of the future in this case, right? And, you know, if the council isn't getting information timely enough, then we should talk about that. But I look at, you know, when the pigeon news was about to break, right? As soon as we got it, I think the council, right? I mean, how many emails have you gotten, right, as a heads up? This is in that same category. It's my job to keep you guys in the loop so that you don't get that call. This policy is mostly oriented to the process as it pertains to there's two main constituencies here, the complainant and the officer. But the rest of the functions of city government still continue to occur as well. Right?
Yeah, I don't mind everyone in the world knowing about it as long as we know about it at the same time everyone else in the world knows about it.
Yeah, no, that's my job is to make sure that happens.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff we talk about and hear about the public being on, viewed by the public, that's after it's done too. It's not like they're gonna find out the day it starts, because we haven't done the investigation yet. Yes, that is true.
Yeah.
If we have a serious investigation, my job is to let city manager know right away, so his job in turn, I'm guessing, is to let you know right away.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that this report that's here noted as annually is a summary of all of the investigations for the year.
Yes. Just so you have an idea of what's going on within the PD.
Okay.
Good, thanks.
So we have,
Chad's.
okay, Chad?
He says that the forms to make complaints are going to be available in City Hall. Is that going to be in the city? Is that going to be in the clerk's office?
Yes, that's my thought anyway. Where else we're going to put them, but.
That's one of the places they would likely be. I mean, I think most of these, they're going to grab them off the web 90% of the time.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I think that's.
It just seems like the city clerks, if you're going to have them somewhere in City Hall, the city clerk's office might be a good place for you to come in.
Yeah.
That way people may end up dropping them in the box or they go down and if it's for one of the police department.
Yep. Yeah.
They may just drop them in the box.
Any comments from the public? Seeing none or hearing none, we can entertain a motion to approve the internal affairs policy. Motion by Chad,
I'll second.
second by Marie. Any further questions or comments?
Do we actually want to decide this thing tonight? Is everyone ready to vote on this thing tonight?
We went over it last one.
You did? Oh, I wasn't here. Okay. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
Okay.
forgot you weren't here. Yeah, we did, Chief
Yeah.
give us an overview and the 8 changes came out of that discussion.
Gotcha.
So we have a motion from Chad, seconded by Marie. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Well, are you comfortable, Tim?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion passes. Thank you, Chief. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Nice work. Mr. Matt Mulheron, if you want to
Matt's
step
here.
up.
Yep.
Thanks for coming in, Matt. Chief, Don, we'll turn it over to you.
It's my pleasure to recommend the appointment of Matt Mulheron as to the position of Fire Chief for the City of St. Albans. One of the ways that we're able to do a lot with a small staff is we believe thoroughly in cross-training and breaking down silos. And Matt's resume and background exemplifies that. He's been working for the city for the last 20 years, starting in the rec department, moving up through public works, and the whole time continued serving the town of St. Albans as a firefighter, as well as the city of St. Albans. He's served as our deputy fire chief for the last 8 years. Hard to believe, time flies. And for the past couple of months, he's been serving as interim fire chief. So Matt checks all the relevant boxes on paper, but one of the reasons I'm also excited to recommend him for fire chief is he also has a lot of the attitude and the interpersonal skills and the right approach to the job. Matt runs point on our public health and safety program. He's out there in the trenches doing those inspections day in and day out. And he also then is responsible for all of the training and the oversight of our call force, everything from the technical aspects to fostering in the morale, the esprit de corps, our call force members, our hourly firefighters are, if not an all-time high, certainly close to it. He's well respected by the troops, and he's a pleasure to work with. So I'd ask for your support and would open it up for any questions.
I don't have a question. I would just say I too have worked with Matt on a number of different things, and Marie and I actually sat in on the PHSO meeting last week, and I have others. And Matt, you've been very responsive to all my calls, and I've been impressed with the way you've handled the PHSO along with Marty, and I think that's one of the best things we do in the city. So your stick-to-itiveness with all of those different addresses is greatly appreciated. So
Thank you.
Yeah. Well said. I agree. I've had a few times where I've contacted you for different things, and you're always there within minutes and getting the job done. So I appreciate it, and I think this is great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I would entertain a motion to approve. If anyone else have any comments?
Question, but I'll do it after.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion to approve Matt as the fire chief.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Chad, seconded by Marie. Any questions or comments? Chad?
I'll ask it after. Has nothing to do with this.
Okay. You're leading me astray here.
Yeah.
Any questions? Kate, you good? Tim?
Good.
All those in favor of appointing Matt as fire chief, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Matt, congratulations, well deserved.
Thank you.
Matt, I have a question for you.
Hey Matt, don't run off here.
No, you got a question.
Chad, I believe it's Chief.
Chief, sorry. Chief, what is going to be the fire department's biggest needs in the next few years?
It's hard to say right now. Chief Taylor left us in pretty good shape as far as equipment-wise. It's, you know, I don't know. We got some pretty good trucks. Our oldest truck is a 2000, which is showing its age, but it's going to be like the next 5 to 8 years are going to be the biggest part. The inspection program's doing well. The equipment side, the smaller equipment is good. It's probably the next 5 to 8 years will be that question.
So are we looking at a building, you think, anytime soon?
Be honest with you, the station that we're in, the apparatus bay, that's perfect. We got the hose tower, it holds all of our equipment. That's the best part of that building. That's the only part that's not, you know, deteriorating. So I'm happy with that part.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
Congratulations. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 7, Planning Commission update and discussion. Stan Burdine and Chip Sawyer. Stan, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. For those of you that know me, you know I like to be thorough, so forgive me if it's not quite up to snuff. Chip is handing out I won't call it quite last minute. I did have a little bit more time than 5 minutes to do it, but since this is the first time we've done it, I just wanted to make sure that it was a little bit organized and be able to be ready to speak to you. So I want to just kind of quickly summarize what we do in 4 general groups. One, of course, is the city master plan and land development regulation cycle, where the plan is done and where the regulations are reviewed on a regular basis. The city master plan was approved back in 2017, latter part of 2017, so we're now into the land development portion of that cycle. Next one is, of course, there are priorities that you folks, give us in terms of requested or suggested ordinances, and also other boards may come to us and say, look, could you look at a change like this, that, and the other? So there's stuff coming from within the city. There may be regulatory, I hesitate maybe to use it, mandates, but that's probably the right word when, for example, the latest proposed regulation coming out of Montpelier that was Senate 237 that we spent quite a bit of time on reviewing and providing input on. So that's an example of things that might come from the state. Now, they may be housing related, they may be planning related, sometimes they're environmentally related, street and corridor, preservation, that kind of stuff. And certainly not last and least would be public input questions. We do have people that come, maybe not as often as we would like, to our meetings. I think you can sympathize. But we do have people that come with either complaints or requests, or how, could you do this, consider this kind of review. And as I'll mention later here in some detail, we also do walk around neighborhoods and that kind of stuff to just kind of really see things on the land and get input from people. So we're going out to people. So those are those are four, for ease of discussion tonight, 4 areas that we work. Somebody might break it down a little bit different or be a little bit more detailed in those sections, but that'll work for this evening. I thought I'd just also say, and by the way, feel free to interrupt me at any point, that the Planning Commission and the planning staff has been absolutely wonderful to work with. It's not that often you get a chance like this to be able to say how much you enjoy working on a commission. I've been on many commissions in more than one community. I have been very happy to have moved to St. Albans, and extremely happy, even though Chip had to ask me 3 times to be a member of the Planning Commission. It's a great group and a hard-working group. Also, since this is our first review, I thought I'd acknowledge that at the beginning of the year, when I became Planning Commission Commissioner, the head of the commission, that Chip, myself, and Denise Smith, who was the co-chair, we sat down to discuss our priorities, and we also had a meeting with one of our commission meetings with the commission as a whole to discuss our priorities and do that in light of what we were currently planning on working on, the development regulations, but also in terms of the priorities that the council had laid out for the year, to make sure that anything we were doing was consistent with and thinking about those kinds of priorities. So we tried to even, so I guess I'm saying that just like you're asking us for an update, we ourselves kind of started off the year with that in mind. So a little bit more detail on the 4 general areas I kind of laid out. The city master plan having been done, we started into the land development regulations, and it's fair for me to say that one of the ways that we looked at it, we were essentially balancing a review of what we felt the needs were for maybe updating it, with very much an attitude that the regulations were really not in any way bad, and that we didn't want to break something, if it's not broken, fix it kind of thing. So we really wanted to focus on those things that we thought might really need attention. In doing the review, we discovered that there were a number of places where we felt there could be definite improvements. So we wound up with, you might say, a little bit fuller agenda than we started with. We're still not planning on trying to do a massive rewrite if we don't have to, and both for our sake and for the sake of the community. But there were some things that came up. So some of the areas that we're now under review are a refined development of the business districts. When we think about how the business districts are laid out in the town, and then you actually look at the way the city it uses its land, there are areas, and for a moment I'll focus on North Main Street. If you think about right at the shall we say, the corridor as we enter in there, where the gas stations are and the Messenger and that kind of stuff, that's a fairly concentrated commercial kind of area. There's nothing wrong with it being so, but then in a very brief time, we're in an area which, we're describing right now as a professional residential corridor. So we're thinking of making some refinements to the business districts to reflect the actual uses, so that if somebody comes in and suggests to, say, tear down one of the houses and develop a gas station in the middle of North Main Street, not saying that there aren't other things in the current regulation that would actually limit that kind of stuff, but it is a permitted use. That we don't have to say to somebody who legitimately comes to us, oh, sorry, yes, it's permitted, but you're going to have to jump through 1,000 hoops. We'd like to be both fair to a potential applicant and fair to the neighborhood that said, wait a minute, how does he get to do this? So that kind of thought process is being applied, not to be restrictive. Some people might consider it to be downzoning in some cases. In some cases, it might actually be upzoning. If we look as you're leaving town, leaving the city, going towards the town, towards the lake, there are areas down along there which are much more developed than what might be considered to be quote for the district. So if we look around and we say, what kind of uses we are really healthy and good and help us continue on, and do our regulations currently reflect that use? If it does, let's not change it. If it's someplace like along North Main Street, it's probably logical to put something in. There would be some sort of professional residential area that allows for things like dentists and lawyers' offices and that kind of stuff, but not some of the more heavy business uses that might be allowed in other areas. But still business use. We're not trying to get rid of anything. So that's one, and I spent a little time on there just to give you a flavor of it, because it's the kind of mentality that we've applied to other things. We did, of course, check what are the conditional uses, because, and the permitted uses in those and other districts are the definitions that we currently have, up to snuff. Is everything covered that should be covered? Some of that's just homework items, but it's still important to do so you don't cause problems for a design review board or, somebody else or an applicant who, read something and go, what the heck are they mean by this? We are giving some consideration to form-based codes in the residential areas, because sometimes it's shall we say, an illustrative way of being able to provide for the applicant what the expectations are, rather than having to get too down into the weeds of the design district with the design review. So we're kicking some things around there. We have not had much time on that. As you're aware, we did at one point start to consider some density bonuses. Now let me be very careful here, because when we first started that, where there's some people who say, wait a second, we don't need to have more buildings that are chopped up and high uses. But we recognized, and this directly relates to the request from the state on the proposed law that would have chopped the city up into 8-acre lots and had a bunch of very negative impacts. But that law was well-intentioned, so when we asked ourselves, another question as a commission we asked ourselves was, it is not the zoning regulations mission to encourage development or reinvestment, but at the same time, we shouldn't get in the way of appropriate reinvestment. What can we do when we look at our residential areas that have sometimes buildings that are more run down, and we recognize they're large and difficult to maintain in our current market, and yet we don't want to have them just chopped up willy-nilly? Would there be some sort of a density bonus so that it wouldn't change externally the land use? We're not talking about just like what the state did, is chopping things up and all of a sudden, just having everybody screaming because, we've taken a low density area and packed a bunch of stuff into it. Quite the contrary. So recognizing that some of these old buildings do need a little TLC, or sometimes more than a little TLC. And in some cases, we don't know this for a fact whether we are going this way. In some cases, it might be reasonable to consider whether some sort of greater density for, let's say, a 3-unit condo, where we're really encouraging ownership by people, in some of these buildings, but and a sense of ownership and belonging in that community, because some of those older buildings were built for very large families that might also have some domestic staff, et cetera. I mean, these were people at one time, some people that were quite well off and have much larger families because that was a thing for the time. So it wouldn't have a higher, shall we say, people impact, There wouldn't be, more intense development or anything like that. It's just recognizing that it's hard to afford some of these old homes, and how could we, do something in a way that's consistent with the home and consistent with the uses. I want to emphasize that's a question we've asked ourselves. A small subset of that is the regulation that we are actually considering right now, and that is the potential blighted home regulation that is being considered, where if somebody is requesting something under some very, defined, limited terms, and say, I need to be able to do X, Y, and Z, they would be allowed an exception to the otherwise density regulations for it. And I can get into more detail with that, but I do want to emphasize that's still under consideration. We've had feedback from the Design Review Board, one of the members, and we ourselves are discussing, how does this really play out? Because we've been very conscious that the best intentions sometimes are, shall we say, the road to hell is paved with them. So that's an example of one of the things in some of the attitudes we're looking at. Another is simplifying the overlay districts. If you look at the current regulations, the overlay districts sometimes don't really make sense relative to the districts. I'm not saying, again, they're not horrible, but it's like, wait a minute, this could be a little bit better here and there, so that's one thing we're looking at. Really, as you can see, we're looking to, shall we say, polish the existing regulations, not change them drastically. One of the things, and Chip may want to speak to this, is because of this kind of thought process and recognizing that there are some areas that we have very large lots. And one thing I'd like to mention for you in specific is that many of these lots front along the road but have very deep backs. And that's not just up in the hill section. Even we have, lots that are, some of the ones, let's say down as at Elm Street, fairly narrow lots, but they go way the heck back. There's a temptation on the part of developers sometimes to, want to put an extra, housing unit behind. Sometimes that, frankly, is not good land use, and yet it's a legitimate question, okay? So one of the studies that's being considered is a actual land use, review. What is the lot coverage? What are, the curb cuts and that kind of stuff? And Chip, if you'd like to, because you're putting that proposal together, if you'd like to comment on that, this would probably be a great time.
Yeah, that's the municipal land grant application that we put in with a focus on the residential districts, but we could really use better comprehensive data on what our neighborhoods actually look like. The hard data. We can walk around and say this neighborhood's like this and this neighborhood's like that, but when, it's the numbers that the regulations determine. The densities, lot coverages, lot widths, that sort of thing. Setbacks. And so with the state also really pressuring municipalities to allow more or higher dwelling unit densities in our neighborhoods, we wanted to be able to first ground truth our regulations and make sure that they reflect the neighborhoods that we have today in terms of densities and the uses, and in the end probably have more than just 2 residential districts, because that's painting our community with too broad a brush. We have many different types of neighborhoods, not just a low density neighborhood and a high density neighborhood. And sometimes the high density neighborhoods end up in the low density district. And so we would then use that data to not only ground truth the districts, but then the Planning Commission could have a conversation about where are some of these areas where we could start allowing some higher dwelling unit densities that would allow us to say that we are trying to do our part to meet what the state's been trying to mandate and didn't quite succeed in this legislative biennium, but it's going to come back around. And I think it's sort of a way of us sort of taking over that conversation in our community rather than having it come from the state. Yeah, and it would come along with a modernization of the residential districts that the Planning Commission's been wanting to do for quite a while.
So that gives you a flavor of some of the stuff that in the land development regulation review that we're under, and I can come back to that. As you know, many of these things work together, so why don't I continue through and finish off? But you can interrupt me by all means, but I think you'll see it as a whole, and then we can have a good conversation maybe about how they relate to each other. You can already see some of the stuff that's coming up in that way. There are, of course, priorities that you as the council may, bring to us. I believe the congregate housing, if I recall rightly, that was one that was, a council requested change. There are other regulatory mandates. And on this one, I'd like to plant a seed here. We had a meeting with our legislators and some of the members of the commission because it was a special planning commission meeting. There's one thing that I'm deeply concerned with, and this has been an issue for as long as I've been involved in planning. And mind you, when I went to the University of Vermont, which was several decades ago, my degree was in community planning and design. And at that point, I remember that the associate planning director for Chittenden County said that he felt that a lot of the communities in Vermont did not understand the development and did not understand the need for, and he shuddered to say this, urban typicals, because we don't think of ourselves as urban, and yet in almost all of our larger cities throughout, we are in effect urban. It's not in New York City, but we have different patterns of development that are more concentrated. And part of this is a national conversation. I'm going to jokingly say it goes back to, everyone with their own little home on their own little lot with the car in the driveway and the chicken in the pot, okay? The kind of, post-war image of development that gobbled up a lot of land and forgot that much of America for a long time actually lived in walk-up flats, et cetera, in cities. So we sometimes lose sight of that, and especially in a community like Vermont that, even though I was born in it, love it, and grew up in it, we think of the stereotype, but it's almost more of an external, Vermont Life marketing one of, the whitewashed house and the red barns. When in fact, in many of our downtowns, we have, places where you not only have, but actually want to have the ability to, walk from your home, whether it be on the hill or down on Elm Street or, one end of town or the other, to the post office and those kinds of things. And frankly, it's a very congenial life. So the idea, and this is was one of my concerns with the state regulation of chopping it up at 1/8-acre lots, is that's just taking, the chicken in the pot and the car in the driveway and simply downsizing it to, little mini houses, okay? It doesn't downsize well. It occasionally does, so I'm not going to criticize that, but I'm going to say it's a lack of imagination. And I'm going to say that we can, just as Chip is talking about being proactive, we can be proactive. If you think of some of the stuff that's being done up over where TD Bank is with some of those residential areas, if we think that, maybe we just extend a boundary out one more block and say, in that block, you can go higher, and we actually encourage. I mean, think of the programs, Dom, that you've been doing to, encourage things. Those are the kinds of things that can help us continue the wonderful things that St. Albans has been doing, I'm going to say for the last 30 years, to pick itself up, dust itself off, and do all this kind of stuff and really make it the community it is. I'm similarly going to, as I alluded to, in some of the areas, let's say in what we call low density development, they might be low density in terms of low lot coverage, but that doesn't mean in some of these larger homes, whether they're in other places, that we might consider heavy emphasis, underscore, appropriately designed multiple units that encourage high quality development for the right size. Remember, a lot of our children need to have something that's smaller because today you can't afford a larger house, so they don't mind something because it's still theirs. And that, frankly, was the thrust of the state legislation. They were looking for what they called gap housing. That wasn't affordable subsidized housing. That was affordable ordinary housing, so it simply wasn't oversized. So, as Chip was alluding to, the ground truth study that allows us to look at in detail what we do have, how many of those back lots could be used rather than just creating more driveways, maybe allowing to have a stair tower and an extra unit on it so it still has the same character of the neighborhood, still a lot of open space and not more land devoted to driveways and parking lots. We're actually using it in a way that's consistent with both the past and our current needs. So those are why I mention that in the context of the regulatory mandates, because we are going to be pushed on this, and frankly, we should want to do this before our children, for, our, younger nephews and all of those kinds of stuff that frankly don't have a place. So in a certain sense, this isn't just good land use planning, it's almost a social justice issue. So that will come back, but it shouldn't come back to haunt us. We should be active participants. So the last item I've already alluded to, and that's kind of the public questions, but there are the ones that do come through. People will ask about certain areas they can do things. Sometimes it's a developer that's kind of wanting to skirt things creatively, but they still deserve our time, and we work with them. And other times they're simply questions, but we've also walked through the neighborhoods and let people know that we were announced our meetings in the neighborhoods that we were going to walk through. We've done 2 so far. To really get a sense of it, encourage people to meet. For example, we met in the Barlow Street School, and we met in the Parish Hall. And so, those kinds of things allow people to feel more comfortable doing this. Frankly, we had some really nice turnout in those meetings. So I'm going to stop there. I think I've covered quite a bit of stuff, and hopefully I haven't taken too much time.
Chip, when you do those visits, I know they probably are in the updates, weekly updates, but can you just send a reminder out to the council as well when you do that?
Yes.
Just to bring it to our attention. And what is the status of the planning grant?
Well, here in December, I think.
So it's been submitted?
It's been submitted, yep.
And Stan, just for clarification, you enjoy working with Chip and he does a good job?
He does a great job, and I enjoy working with him.
Okay, good.
This was not me just buttering him up. He's a keeper.
No, I would totally agree with that as well.
Not that I'm the one to judge, you are, but I like to.
Any questions for Chip or Stan?
If I could just really quickly, Stan, I wanted to say thank you for the invite and the advocacy around S237 and the acknowledgement that when you're at the table and you're engaged in this conversation that's happening about trying to create housing density in the way it makes sense for our community, we'll actually be able to help guide that conversation. The advocacy that the Planning Commission did, it was really critical to that conversation, especially given the timing of everything with COVID and the shutdowns and the coming back to the State House. The fact that you all bird dogged it, it made a big difference, and I hope that the bill is significantly better than it was once we got the other pieces of it passed. But you're totally right that conversation's not over at the state about how we achieve more housing density, and that it is a social justice issue. So thank you for acknowledging the push and pull there, and continue to tell us what to do up at the state level, because they heard you.
That's good.
to an extent.
I hope they heard it as a true downtown, a really investment in Vermont issue. It wasn't a pushback on the need. Are there other questions or comments?
No, just Stan, I'd like to thank you for all your time you put into it, and appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a really good group to work with, and appreciate Stan coming in on short notice to kick off these board and commission reports to the City Council.
Yes, thanks for the update. It's great information.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Chip, and you're still up on item number 8, truck turning off from Lake Street.
Have a wonderful evening.
See you, Stan.
Thank you, Stan.
All right, thank you. We are looking at some issues with the intersection improvements that we made to Lake Street, Catherine, and Federal a few years ago. There's an issue that you can see on the maps in your packet, but when we created the four-way stop at Federal, Catherine, and Lake, we put a left turn lane and a right turn lane going up the hill on Lake Street, going east. And we've heard that there are some tractor-trailer trucks that when they try to turn right onto Catherine from Lake, they don't use the left turn lane for extra room, and sometimes they end up taking the corner too shallow and they clipped the roof of the building of 100 Lake Street, the Giroux building. When we designed this intersection, we figured that trucks were going to see the better conditions on Market Street, the one-way street, and take that, go up Stebbins, head to Main Street that way. But, you know, as we know, as we learned with the Upper Weldon issue, you can't always assume common sense with where folks are driving these big tractor trailers. And so sometimes you've got to take a more forceful approach. So for the council's consideration, you know, no decisions have been made, but in order to deal with this issue, and also carrying on the fact that we have talked about limiting truck traffic up Lake Street in the past, we have proposed an emergency ordinance, a first reading of a permanent ordinance, and also some ideas for a signage plan and a curb extension plan around 100 Lake Street to deal with this. So the emergency ordinance and the permanent ordinance basically say that you cannot take a right turn in a truck onto Catherine from Lake or onto South Main Street from Lake Street. Those are two corners that have just always been problematic for trucks, and they really ought to be taking Market Street and Stebbins Street to get to Main Street and Route 7. And the signage plan in your packet would basically tell trucks that are going east on Lake Street heading toward Main, that before they get to Market Street, that if you want to get to Route 7, you should turn right on Market. And then signs that say, don't turn right on Catherine. And hopefully that would encourage trucks, and these are things they encounter all the time, is truck routes or suggested truck routes, that if you'd like to get to a major thoroughfare, this is the best way to do it. It would tell them to take Market and Stebbins to get to Main Street. And if they're coming to the end of Federal Street going south, it would tell them to go straight onto Catherine. Because you can go straight onto Catherine, no problem. It's when you're trying to turn onto Catherine. And it would send them down Catherine Street to Stebbins rather than taking a left onto Main and then a left on the lake rather, and then trying to take a right onto Main Street. And then the final thing, which was, we had some consultants looking at it. I emailed it out today. I did make some copies if you haven't seen it yet. We do also have a suggestion from the engineers that helped us with this intersection to bump out the curb at the corner of 100 Lake Street and also add either an indicator pole, a reflective indicator pole, or a full-on concrete bollard to well, it's hard to really push one of these tractor trailers once it's going somewhere, but to let the drivers know that you've got to get around this thing and you've got to plan that into your turn, or don't take the turn. We looked at a couple options. I think the curb extension certainly is a good idea. I would suggest at first glance that we go with more of a indicator pole than a full concrete bollard, because a concrete bollard will definitely get a truck driver's attention and might even keep the truck from hitting the building. But if that bollard ever does get hit, then it's going to be damaged, and it will cost as much to replace that as it did to install it in the first place. Whereas an indicator pole, if it does get hit, is easier to replace. The curb, you know, at 100 Lake did allow for a little bit more room for that turning radius to turn right onto Catherine. But with what we've seen in that truck drivers just aren't using all of the space. They aren't, you know, trucks take wide turns over and take left turn lanes all the time in order to make a right turn. We see it all over the city. But sometimes they just don't want to take the space, or there might be cars there and they're not patient enough to wait till both lanes are clear so that they can take the turn. And it's problematic, you know, it's sort of trying to put a square peg in a round hole. If you have an intersection where your plan for trucks is that they take up a lane they're not supposed to be in the first place, you really got to give them a different option. So we would actually take this curb, which had provided a better turning radius, and we'd extend it out to really let visually a truck driver would see that and say, all right, if I'm going to take this turn, I've got to make sure I have a lot of space. I'm not supposed to be in that area where that curb is. And that would visually push the truck farther away from the building as well. We do not have any estimates on what this work would cost. We would need to take a look at the underground utilities one more time. I think the work is feasible, though, certainly the curb extension. Public Works hasn't taken a look at it yet either. This is very preliminary, but just, you know, showing folks that we're taking a look at the issue and looking at solutions. Happy to take any questions.
I have a couple. And I've been singing this tune for probably the last 6 years or 7 years when this started, if you recall. But that corner is no place for a bollard like you describe in this pamphlet here. So has anyone even talked to Keith about that, having that type of bollard there?
Keith asked for a bollard.
In this style with the red?
Well, we haven't gone over the
Okay.
final design of the bollard. That can certainly be it.
Yeah, 'cause I don't think he's gonna care for that. Maybe something in the style of what was up in the Passport building, maybe. But they're not gonna take this corner. They're not gonna pay attention to that curb, just like they didn't pay attention to the curb on Upper Newton Street when their trucks were taking the corners coming down. So what had to happen is the city went in and widened the road, and now there's not an issue there. So it's gonna have to be some type of construction like that. And it's gonna be even tougher going onto Market Street. I'm down there all the time. I see it all the time. I park there and watch cars and trucks going in and out of there. That's a tough corner. Those two streets are very difficult for a tractor-trailer truck to negotiate to get onto those streets. It just so happens Keith's in a rough position there in that building. But the best is Market Street. But I gotta believe there's gotta be something going on there, because it's still gonna be a tough go with a truck. Something's gonna have to happen to get those trucks to go onto Market Street, because that's still a very tough turn for a truck. But it's got to be Market Street, because it can't be Main Street and it can't be Catherine Street. So it's got to be Market Street. There's no doubt in my mind. There should be no doubt in anyone's mind. It's just, I'm wondering if we're gonna waste money doing this little stuff by Keith's place on Catherine Street when we should be investing a little more money on how to get those trucks onto Market Street, because Market Street is the street for them. And the other thing you're gonna have to think about is limiting the direction of traffic, maybe, or doing something where maybe Catherine Street is just for northbound traffic, and it forces everyone coming off Lake Street to go down Market Street. I wouldn't want to see that, because I don't like it. It's easier for me to go down Catherine Street. Believe me, I do it every day, several times a day. But you may have to do it to force people to say, this is the route you're gonna take. Because just like the problems that you had up there, you're gonna have them down there. And it's a nightmare. I mean, it's almost comical to see a truck go up Lake Street and try and take that turn onto Main Street at 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning. It's a joke. The cars are backed up. The truck's halfway in the intersection. The light's going from from one color to the next color. Cars aren't able to get to where they want to go because one truck's trying to negotiate that turn. I mean, this is an excellent choice to make them go onto Market Street, but unless we do something big, they're not going to use Market Street.
So you're right. We spent a lot of time and energy on trying to get this right when we did the Federal Street intersection. And Market Street was designed for it. We can't pick up additional land there because we got the railroad on one side and Keith on the other. I mean, I don't know who's tougher, right? So Market Street, yeah. What we have is the best I think that we can get geometrically. Where I think we haven't done as good a job is this sign package. We should have done this when we did the intersection. It was a loose end. Mm-hmm. You've been pointing it out. It was in the goals and objectives last year. It's just one of those, it's like that last little bit of trim when you remodel your house that you always mean to get to. Yeah. So I think we need to do this. This is the prudent next step.
I think that they'll do it if it's easy for them to do it.
Yeah.
If there's a car on Market Street, they're not doing it.
Well, I mean, we can do some of those things.
You know,
but-
they're not gonna try and make, that is just, it isn't gonna happen.
We'll have them take another look at the turning radiuses onto Market.
Yeah, I mean, and I think Keith is probably, his eyes are open saying, geez, I mean, maybe I gotta do something on this side with the city so that I don't ruin.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's engaged in the issue now, I think,
Yeah.
right, in a way that he hasn't been previously.
Yeah. But you should take a look at it, and maybe it won't work, but I gotta believe it will. All traffic north, or southbound is going on Market Street. Anyone going on Catherine Street is northbound only, and that just forces everyone to, I know it's a pain in the butt for some of the,
Yeah.
because a four-way intersection wasn't supposed to be that way. It's easy, it's worked out great for us, everyone loves it, for the most part, and cars can get from Federal Street over to Catherine Street without having to make that turn and then make another turn. Although I use that as sometimes I use that as a strategy to get over there quicker, but, and it really is not what we intended on that four-way stop, but I mean, we may have to revert to that.
You know,
to make sure those trucks get on Market Street.
You know, I would suggest we have them look one more time at the geometry of Market Street, make sure it's optimized for that turn. And then do the signage package for the corridor and see how it goes.
Yeah. The other
I would
thing,
definitely
Chip,
do that before we take Catherine Street and make it one way.
what about, I mean, what if we had to eliminate some parking there too?
Right, and that's what they would be, that's one of the things we'd say, you know, if there are cars parked all the way out, you know, do we have to eliminate some of the parking at the northern end of Market to make it work?
Yeah.
We might find we don't have to. We might find it has a lot more to do with maybe eliminating the left and right turn lane ahead of the tracks.
Yeah.
So that you can use both of those lanes and just have the left and turn lane come up. On
Maybe we didn't think it out enough when we did the intersection, because the intersection really works out well, really. It really does. But
Oh, we
should have
had
put
the
a little more
best
thought
plan.
into that.
We just have a loose end that we need to
Yeah.
tie up. I mean,
Yeah.
the reason we can't do Catherine Street northbound only is then if you're coming down Federal, you gotta then turn right on the lake and then make a left on the Market.
Is there any way we could have them go down South Elm?
Not with these guys on the council.
Just kidding. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah, but I think this is
Engine
it.
brakes
This is going to do it. It's
Yeah.
just, I don't think signs are going to be enough, Chip. I don't. It's going to have to be something more, because, and you can't put a cop there 24 hours a day. And who wants another light there? And, you know.
Can't
it's
afford a
just-
light. Yeah.
The light's not gonna.
Yeah, it's not going to work. And
What do you want from us? You're gonna take it back, no actions needed?
Well, this is what we wanted for the signage plan in the bollard. We still need to,
This is the sign, this is a briefing.
yeah.
Next up is the emergency ordinance. We'd like you to enact that and do first reading on the permanent ordinance that implements this. So the emergency ordinance allows us to put up the signs, and we can change it before the snow flies, so that Keith isn't living with it all winter. Those are the next two items.
Yeah.
So can I just make a quick comment? I think this is fine. I think this is just another Band-Aid on a bigger problem. So again, we had a truck coming up Lake Street maybe a week ago. I can't remember when I texted Marty, but tried to take a right on the South Elm, took out signs. They're 4 feet on, they're almost on the sidewalk. There needs to be a truck route in the city. I mean, we can do one corner, but they're still coming down North Elm. They're still coming across South Elm. They're still coming down and up Lower Weldon. These streets aren't made for these big trucks. And I mean, they're wreaking havoc on some of the trees and stuff that we have on. I mean, they should be on these, there should be truck route signs right from the interstate. Not that they're gonna follow, I mean, they don't follow the, you know, your GPS is wrong sign, but I mean, this has gotta be expanded bigger.
We had a truck take out the pedestrian sign on the corner of Main and Fairfield in front of Haynes.
Yeah.
And kept going.
Yeah.
And that is a.
How many trucks have you seen take out the plant holders on the lights?
Yeah.
When they first came out, we were replacing them things once a month. You know?
I think it just needs to be, the whole truck route needs to be marked out through the city so they know where they're going. If they start seeing truck route signs when they get off the interstate, they're gonna follow them. And when they come, I mean, we know where they're going, and they're headed down to Pearl Street. If they're coming up late, more than likely, they've been down on Pearl.
Well, goals and objectives are coming up in a couple minutes.
Okay.
So yes, we recommend the council adopts the emergency ordinance. It does first reading of the.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Tim, second by Chad. Any other questions or comments for Chip? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes.
And that's the emergency ordinance?
Yep.
Okay, so, and you don't need anything for C. I mean, you got the reading in. We don't need a discussion and vote on that. 8C, first reading, you don't have, just move on to the second, right? Next meeting.
We either
Yeah.
do, we either accept a first reading by council motion or council consensus. If we have all the heads nodding, then we say a first reading's fine, depending on how you want to do it.
Everyone's fine with the first reading on that? Head
And just-
nods, so you have consensus.
All right. The emergency is right here.
So now we move on to the request for the signage grant.
We've been talking to La Casa, which was La Casa Burrito. Now it's La Casa Loco Bar and Grill, about doing one of our sign facade grants. This is where we sort of partner with a business to make a larger sign than they otherwise would be able to do. We go 50-50. We did this with the Drake, very nice sign at the new Drake Bar and Kitchen. And Shannon at La Casa is going for a different sort of a look. It's kind of a Mexican restaurant, but also a nightclub. And she has more of a flashier, fun look to her sign. The value added on this one is that this sign would look pretty snazzy. The chicken, the words, they would be bolted to the sign panel on the building to stand off. They would not be just stuck to the building, but they'd be off of it a little bit. And they, we don't allow classic internally lit signs in the historic district, but you can have some of the nice new the ways of doing signs where the sign is opaque, but you put lights behind it, and the lights kind of shine out around the sides of it. You call it halo lighting. So the plan is to have these elements sort of standing off give it a little three-dimensional feel on the side panel, have LED lights behind them, and so they'll cast a halo around the words in the image at night. And they actually do have the technology for the loco portion to give it that sort of paintbrush look, that the Durabond that they're going to use, the metal panel that they're going to use, can be routed to create those little gaps and gouges to give it that paintbrush look. So this would be a very interesting sign for us to partner with a business on. We've never done one like this before. And we have an estimate for fabrication and installation of $4,600. So with the 50-50, the ask is for up to $2,300 or 50% of whatever the total cost ends up being, whichever is smaller.
Is the backlighting going to be the same color as the lettering?
No, I believe that'll just be a bright white or warm white color. Yeah.
Marty, is the color of this chicken the same one that was the color of the Beverage Mart many years ago when we told them that they could not?
Remember Chicken Bone Cafe?
Yeah.
I don't know, I haven't seen that.
Well, if you got this, you can't tell the color, but if you got this, you can tell the color. But I just thought I'd throw that out.
Yeah, it does look pretty similar.
But everything's been approved by the DAB, right, Chip?
This sign will probably just be administrative, go before Dave. They've allowed colors like this before.
Yeah.
At the beverage bar.
Chip, is it big enough?
It actually looks smaller on this. I noticed that This does not look like it's 55 inches wide or 35 inches high. It would show larger than what it is on the representation.
Just from my own personal perspective, I think we sometimes, one of the reasons we're involved in signs is signs benefit the business owner, but it's like a facade. It affects the look and feel of the place. And there's nothing worse than a sign that doesn't fill up all the space that's allotted for it.
Mm-hmm.
And this one looks like a very nice sign. I'm just not sure it's really taking advantage of all the real estate that's being offered, and that's the reason we pay for it, so they don't cheap out, right?
Between the two, you got a total of 8 feet, right? I mean, seems like quite a bit. That's the length of this table, probably?
Are you adding the 51 and the 55? Is that how you're getting there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the scaling is off on the overlay. Am I wrong about that? It looks, it's just the way the picture is taken and the way
They shrunk the image to fit on the sign panel the way this picture was taken, but I think that if you were actually standing up on a ladder and looking at the perspective is forced by the fact that the person's below the sign panel looking up. And so that space looks smaller than it really is. And they shrunk the sign to fit because they probably thought it looked bad if the sign was outside the area where it's actually going to be in this representation. I think we can pass along, to fill up the space as much as possible. Those lights that you see will come out, those down lights. One of the nice things is that that's actually a very nice sign panel. It's that weathered wood look. So anything that's not covered by the image is still gonna, it's all gonna look nice. And I think it might be tough sometimes to fill up
You'd have to really redesign
a long
it.
rectangle.
Yeah.
Like, you're just suddenly you're starting to just make things up to fill up the entire space. When someone looks at this, they're gonna look at that sign panel and think that's one big sign, and it's got the logo and the wording on it.
Chip, is the name of the business La Casa Loco Bar and Grill? Or is it Bar and Grill La Casa Loco?
It's La Casa Loco Bar and Grill.
Does anyone else think it's odd that those are reversed on the sign?
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Ditto.
Maybe we're nitpicking this, but I don't know.
We can always switch the order.
I mean, if that's what the business wants, I
Yeah.
suppose that's fine, but.
Well, maybe the council could consider a motion approving the concept and the amounts and pass on the sentiments for what it's worth.
I'd love to do it, but, based on the recommendations that you've heard tonight, I'm agreeing with all those.
So as
I think
conditions
you're right,
or
Kate.
as encouragement?
Not as conditions, as observations.
Yeah.
For what it's worth.
Recommendations, or I don't know, comments?
Tim, is that a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the planning grant, the signage grant.
I'll second that. I also want to say that the management of this particular business has been so creative through the COVID time, and just Shannon and her crew have just been great, and they've definitely been on our rotating list of places to go eat out, and they have just been, Shannon's been asking me about what are the rules and how do we do this, and I've been trying to set her up with the state. I just think we've got a business and a business owner here who's invested in taking a spot that has had some issues over time, and just really manage it well and be a good member of the community. And I just wanted to say they've been doing a lot under tough circumstances to move that business forward. So glad to have the opportunity to support them.
Okay, so we have a motion on the grant for $2,300 by Tim, seconded by Mike. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you, Chip.
Thank you.
Moving on to city manager report, Dom.
Thank you. Just a couple of items here, I think. we've talked past several meetings about our desire to get some racial equity training for the city staff and boards. That proved to be a much more difficult task than we originally thought, mostly because everybody else has the same directive in the state. And so we took a recommendation from Nina Curtis, who directs our Restorative Justice Center, for a trainer out of Minnesota, who she had experience with. And she was just absolutely floored with his presentation style, his ability to transfer his lived experience to a Vermont audience. She was after me to hire Tony from the beginning, and so we are here recommending that we enter into a contract for Tony Hudson and his company, Racially Conscious Collaboration. The proposal is for 2 6-hour trainings delivered virtually. The intended group size is up to 50. So with that, if we do it twice, we think we can offer it in enough, diverse enough setups that we can get all the staff in that need to get in, as well as all the city boards who have an interest in it. So that's it in a nutshell. The foundations, that we're starting with the foundations module that's described in the PowerPoint handout. The main deliverable is, by the end of this seminar, your people will have engaged in relevant and meaning practice with the Racially Conscious Collaboration foundational tool for effective conversations about race. We're ready to pull the pin. I'd welcome any questions.
Motion to approve the racial equity training.
Second.
Quick question, is this a 6-hour block?
It's 2 6-hour blocks, and the 6-hour block will probably be broken up into 3-hour blocks.
Okay, so if we do it in the evening, it'll be like 6 to 9. We're not going to do it from, 4 in the afternoon to midnight, or I want it to be available for everyone. So those of us with day jobs,
Yeah.
except for 6 hours during the day.
Yeah, it'll be an organizational challenge because we've got those of us with day jobs and we got the night shift in the police department, right? So we'll figure out how to put the puzzle together. We haven't gotten that far yet.
Don, I just want to make sure I heard you right. It's 6 hours total, 2 3-hour blocks, right?
2 6-hour.
The cost proposal is 2 6-hour. The expectation is not that you go to 2 6 hours.
No.
The training itself is a 6-hour training.
Okay.
And we're going to do it twice.
Okay, great. Got it, thank you.
We offered twice.
So 6-hour training in one big long block.
No.
Okay. So
You-
each 6-hour training we can break into 2 3-hour segments.
Yep,
And then they're going to offer that twice.
correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Where does the discussion of mandatory come into play here?
I think that's under the mayor's authority with city council operations. Oh, you mean for staff?
Well, no, I was thinking even more on the board side.
Yeah. I haven't gotten there, I think it's fairly easy on the staff side. On the boards, board and commission side, I don't think you have that authority off the top of my head. I think you can say it's mandatory, you can require it, but there's removal provisions for each of those boards that are unique, right? So, and they're not, I can't think of a board where it wouldn't be appropriate off the top of my head. I can think of some where it's more appropriate than others.
What's the timing on it?
His proposal says October. I don't think that's realistic. We'll operationalize all of that. The main thing I think that we just wanted to report out that we got a provider, we're gonna get it done sometime in the next month and a half. So, I know we were under a lot of pressure from folks that felt like we needed to do more, do it faster. It took longer than we thought, but we're ready to press go.
Did we have the motion?
Motion and a second.
Motion and a second. So all those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes.
Cool.
Just to dovetail on this, we still haven't heard back from Susanna Davis for her to meet with us as well, but we will continue to try that moving forward. So
I'm gonna jump down to C if it's okay. In your packet, Kate and Chad and the mayor have joined myself and some other community members on the launching of the St. Albans campaign. This is in response to some of the anti-Semitic and Patriot Front posters that were around. We've managed to, we think, find a message that addresses that and also sets it in the context of 2020, which is very much a racial moment, and have a broader approach that is around respecting differences. This is of all types. It's a positive message. And is envisioned, this will run as public service announcements in the messenger. Meaning we don't have to pay for it, but it will be designed as such, and will be on, it'll be a nice full-page ad, and will continue to reflect individual people in the community that are profiled with some of their, the faces of St. Albans, if you will, taking charge of our brand. And then ultimately, it's envisioned to migrate towards lawn signs, stickers, and things that people can do to show their support for it. And is also envisioned to potentially go beyond St. Albans, beyond the city, and is set up so other towns could plug in if they would like. But it'll be launched focusing on the city with some of the sample ads. Tim, Kate, Chad, anything you guys would add to that?
I would just say the committee was great to work with. We will continue to meet to see how we'll review the impacts and maybe any changes we want to make moving forward. Discussion was great. And, as Dom had shared, we're looking to potentially roll this out even further. I think it would be easy to roll it out in Swanton and Enosburg as well as I think our larger employers would be open to the pieces as well, that they can adapt for their organizations and post them internally as well. So that's sort of the bigger hope once we get past what we're doing in St. Albans. So, Kate, I don't know if you have anything.
No.
Chief, I just had curious, are we seeing any recently? No?
I haven't had a report that I know of in a few weeks.
That's good. Anyone? Mike?
I really appreciate the effort that folks who were on the committee put in to come up with this. I wanted to ask maybe Kate or you, Tim, or Chad, if the we respect differences is something that everybody's really married to. That was the one part of this where I was kind of like, I think saying, we celebrate diversity or something that's even more affirmational. I think one of the criticisms of some of the language that we've used here at the council from folks who are interested in making sure that we're looking through an equity lens is, words like tolerance that we were all taught when we were kids, that we're tolerating each other, that, that was a whole 2 or 3 generations were raised that was what we needed to do. And I think we've moved beyond that as a community and in the dialogue right now. So there's something that seems kind of fuddy-duddy to me about we respect differences, with all due respect to the folks who came up with that slogan. So that was just my one criticism of the language.
It was something that we talked about at length, that exact phrase. And we talked about several different ways you could phrase it. There was really good discussion around it. Some people initially thought we should say something more like we celebrate, or, you know, and the word diversity to come into it. In the end, we settled on this after talking through a lot of that stuff, Mike. I think one of the reasons being that there was a real desire to have the word respect there, because there's this sense that the dialogue that's happening now is not respectful, that there's this lack of civility, and the group really wanted to sort of bring that back, that, you know, that respect is a really powerful term. And I hadn't thought about it in that way.
Yeah, I guess the thing is that I'm all about respecting people. Respecting the differences makes it seem like we're appreciating the gap in the animosity, right? And so that was my reaction to that language. So if there is an opportunity to take one crack at that specific language, if the word respect is really important, my suggestion would be to make the subject of that respect be people, or the object, sorry, of that respect be people.
The other thing we talked about was that we realized that we may not get the phrasing 100% right out of the gate, and that we want to maybe be flexible and start it like this, because it's very difficult to like come to a perfect consensus on exactly the wording. But to say, if we run this and then we hear from people that we really want to see the word diversity in here, maybe we could make a change to it and not be totally wedded to this as absolute. And, you know, Tim, jump in if you.
No, you're right.
Because we talked about it at length, and it was very difficult to like come up with something that worked perfectly for everyone. And we know that was just within this small group. You know, put it out to 6,000 people, you're going to have quite a lot of reactions.
Yeah, we talked about the word tolerance and felt that wasn't strong enough, or tolerant. But to Kate's point, we wordsmithed it quite a bit and went around, and I think the key to it is that we can adjust and adapt after maybe the first run. It's I think Emerson's looking to go live with it by the end of this week. So, okay.
Mike, one of the other successes of it is, you know, representatives from St. Albans Neighbors are on the committee, and so you know, they've been the primary activist group encouraging us to lean in, go further, and their representative is okay with where we've landed. So I think it reflects the art of the possible. Okay.
Well, thanks for all of that effort, and I will take my thoughts and
well, you know,
back.
We'll revisit it.
Another quick update. The mayor and I participated in a reboot of the state's Stay to Stay initiative. This is where folks pre-COVID would come up and stay in a hotel and get wined and dined from the local community. Post-COVID, it's going to be done online in a virtual format. And Northwestern Vermont hasn't been represented to date, so we're now included. We're going to try to get on that train. One of the must-dos is out of the gate is to have a promotional video on St. Albans developed, and so we've had that in the budget for several years now to develop something like that, and we just haven't got around to it, so this is a good chance, I think, to get that into production and get it ready. I think the next event is around the end of the calendar year, sometime in December. So we're going to try to participate and get ready for that. More to come, but I think that's a good, that's a room we need to be in. So. And lastly, I took a cut at, on the heels of our retreat, I took a cut at council goals and objectives. They are in your packet. I would welcome questions, additions, amendments.
I'll make a motion to approve the goals and objectives.
You got my addition?
With Chad's addition.
With the truck route?
Truck route, something. Well-defined truck route. Otherwise, I want to say thank you to everyone. I thought it was a great meeting. We don't often get to sit down and talk candidly like that. And there were some tough discussions, so that's good as well.
I would second that as well. So we have a motion by Tim, second by Chad to accept the goals and strategies. Any other questions for Dom? Comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the goals and strategies say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. We'll move on to the mayor's report. Dom, I'm hoping you can help me out. Oh no, I do have it, thank you. First thing, so Kelly reached out to me. They had 2 resignations from the Recreation Board, Megan Manahan and Marty, help me out. He married May.
Who?
He married your
Oh, Justin Wright?
yeah, Justin Wright, thank you. So Justin Wright and Megan Mannion both resigned from the board, so we looked to replace them. Kelly actually has 5 applicants that are interested, so we will be reaching out to the board to do interviews on those 5. In addition to that, she has 5 that are up for renewal, and Dom and I talked about this, as with Kelly. All 5 are up for renewal this year, and my suggestion was we need to spread those expirations out a little bit, because you could end up ideally with 7 people maybe getting upset over a topic of something and say we're done, we're resigning, moving on, and you have to replace the whole board. Not that that could happen with terms, but so they went to the point of breaking it out, 3 3-year terms, 2 2-year terms, and 2 1-year terms. So what I'm looking for is the approval to maintain the terms and to reappoint the 5 individuals who are currently on the Recreation Board.
I move that we accept the recommendations of the Recreation Board here. There were 3 people with 3-year terms, that would be Peggy Manningham, Brian Delore, Mike Zemiak. 2 people with 2-year terms. One would be Matt Allen, the other one is vacant. And 2 people with 1-year terms, which is Merle Bunbury, and 1 vacancy.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mike. Any other questions, comments? Just like to reinforce, you'll be getting an email here in the near future to try to coordinate some interviews for the 5 individuals who are interested. And I think that in itself is exciting. We have 5 people that are looking to serve on 2 spots. So, what's that?
She advertised it heavily.
Oh, she did?
I saw it several places.
Good. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Speaking of boards, we have, to determine the process, we have 12 applicants for the 7 spots on the Police Advisory Commission.
13, I think, actually.
Oh, 13? Yeah. Sorry about that. Of which all of you will be receiving a packet with those 13 applications. And we'll be looking to do some interviews. My recommendation would be, it would be all of us participating in that based on the importance of this. And my recommendation would be that they are done in executive session as well. So looking to see if there's what the discussion might be on that, and move it forward.
So you're thinking that we would interview each applicant as the whole city council with that one applicant in an executive session and rotate through all the
Right.
applicants?
Obviously take a couple nights probably, but that's my thinking. I'm not wed to it by any means, but open to other suggestions. That's a starting point for discussion.
Any reasons for executive session?
I think if you're going to have an honest, true conversation. I think people will feel more comfortable in executive session than they would in a open forum where people can, I don't think you would have a honest conversation in an environment that that potentially could be listened in on by 20 or 50 people. That's my take.
Can we fit that in the executive session rules?
Yeah, absolutely.
As a personnel matter?
The appointment of a public officer.
But that's not the appointment, that would be the.
No city council interviews. Some choose to do it, but no local legislative body feels that has ever felt like the open meeting law required them to interview in open session.
I'm just thinking, if you're going to have a conversation about someone's interaction with the police or their feelings, I think you're going to get a more honest discussion in an executive session than you are than in an open session.
I don't have a problem with
it. I guess it makes me a little bit nervous that, you know, that could be seen as a lack of transparency. I think we want to handle the appointments to this board thoughtfully, and we want to be able to demonstrate that we're doing that. And so closing the meeting just takes away that opportunity. I hear what you're saying about creating a space that's comfortable for people to talk. And I like that idea. But this, it just gives me a little bit of pause.
Understandable.
Good time to think about it, right?
What's that?
Good time.
Yeah, we do. We can, we'll get the packets out to everyone, take a look at them, and then we can revisit this. I don't think we want to wait till the November meeting, but we can
Make a motion to table the approval, the process for interview and selection of PAB members.
Oh, hold on.
I'll withdraw the motion.
What's that?
I'll withdraw my motion.
Yeah. So, thank you. So, we've brought it out in a public meeting as something the council's going to decide on. So now we're going to have to decide on it in a public meeting, how you want to handle it. Right? So, I mean, you can do that in a call, but we're going to have to schedule a meeting, schedule a call to do that.
or decide it now is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And that'll be an open meeting.
That'll be, yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think Kate, you're right, but there's trade-offs, right? So an open meeting is this, right? It'll be televised. And that has its own package of strengths and weaknesses. And versus an executive session is something entirely different. You know, you could publicize the names of who applied.
And I totally get where Kate's coming from. My feeling is if we in fact want a true and honest interview, I mean, put yourself on the other side of the table. I don't know that you're going to, you know, someone's not going to say, well, I had an altercation with an officer when I was 30 years old and I've had bad feelings since then, or well, whatever the case is. I think people are going to be hesitant to have those conversations in an open forum. And that's what we obviously want, transparency with the applicant. And it's a catch-22. You want transparency within the process, but you also want transparency within the interview with the individual. So it's a tough scenario.
Well, let's see where we go with it. I'll make a motion to interview each individual applicant for the PAB by City Council using executive session for each individual interview.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Over as many meetings as it takes to interview all the applicants.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Mike. So discussion, one thing I would add is that if you have questions for the interview process, to get them to Dom to pull them all together and create a.
Could those be made public?
Sure.
So we put the list of questions together, and then we make that public. Is that okay, Kate? Does that do a little bit more for you?
I like that idea.
I like that.
So, some of the discussions that may be had on this board are going to also be difficult. And you can't have an open discussion about why you applied. How are you going to have a difficult discussion while on the board?
I didn't catch the last part, Jeff.
How are you going to have a difficult discussion about some of the things that they're talking about possibly with that board if you can't have a difficult discussion about why you want to be on the board? That's my.
Yeah, I had a similar thought that I think we're sort of welcoming people who have had a lived experience that is relevant, right? And so if they're going to bring that experience to this board, they're likely going to need and want to talk about it as topics come up. So, you know, are we setting a precedent that's something that should be hidden or that you should be uncomfortable about? Or should we start a process where we say, this is why you're joining this board, and so let's talk about it.
Can we ask the person people what they prefer? Maybe some of them, maybe a majority of them don't mind having a discussion.
Do we limit the pool of people who would come if they knew it was going to be open session?
Yeah.
Of qualified people? What if there was someone who was really qualified, but, you know, for some reason doesn't want it in open session? Do we miss out on having that person?
Sorry, Tim.
Go ahead, Tom.
There's the interview, and then there's the deliberations. I mean, we've typically now when we appoint for a board, it's not in front of the council. It's a conversation with 2 or 3 members.
And just to jump in on that, that was gonna be my next comment. How we got away from that because of the awkwardness of having those interviews in an open forum. But go ahead, sorry.
It's also, just as a technical matter, if you're the 13th interviewee and the first 12 are public, you can sit in and listen to all the answers.
Good point.
Right.
Some of them are pretty personal, though. I mean, I suggested to you that, you know, your interactions with the PD, you can't, your interaction differs than the other 12. I mean, I don't have a problem doing an executive session, I'm just not what I hope for, I guess. But, I mean, that's the way it's done for, so all my interviews have all been privately.
Have all been private?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Marie, thoughts?
No, I'm okay with the executive session meeting with them. I think that's appropriate. Like you said earlier, it's you know, we kind of got away from the public interviews of different boards, and so I think the executive's the way to go.
Tim, you're good?
Yeah, I'm good. And I think, you know, a general publication of questions, not limited to those, because an answer to a question could spur another question, but just a generalization on the website or wherever, the types of questions that are going to be asked and done. I think it works. Mike?
Yeah, I think we need to have a more candid conversation potentially with a number of the applicants than we would want to ask them to go through in an open session. And I think that'll be valuable. And I hope that people who might be concerned about that will trust us. I think we're gonna have a more valuable conversation and appoint a better board if we
I would agree with that.
have it in an executive session.
Okay.
Fair enough.
You got to include the mayor and the council?
What's that?
We're just including the mayor and the council on that, correct? That interview process?
Yep. Okay. Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes to, for the interview process. Kate had been in discussion regarding, we heard a little bit, I think we saw it on email probably, about the town looking to engage with the city to request a community visit from Vermont Council on Rural Development. Even though the pipeline might be a little long right now, the town, conversation with Mike and Jess Ross and Kate is why don't we get our letter in as a collaboration between the city and town and get in the queue so that when there is an opening that we potentially will move forward on it. So, or Council on Rural Development will move forward on it. So we just want to make sure the council's on board and do this with a motion.
Yeah. I'll move that we approve a joint letter with the town to request the VCRD community visit jointly.
Second.
I have a motion by Mike, seconded by Kate. Any questions of anyone? Once again, we don't know the timeline, but we will keep you informed as it moves forward. So, all those in favor of the letter, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. Dom, will Kristen take care of that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
A couple things I had. I want to thank Chad for his little library template that's up at Barlow Street School right now. I'm not sure if that discussion has moved forward with the city school wood shop group or not, but hopefully the parks will run with that and we'll have half a dozen of the mini libraries out there, but the one Chad came up with was excellent. So thank you, Chad.
There's one on Icing Drive as well. So as you're going up to go to Hardock by Winter Home is down there as well.
Oh, is that right? The one you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
An old piano in that, so we built with old piano pieces.
Thank you, Chad, for that. Halloween guidelines, just reinforce that council did approve or supported having Halloween. Downtown's going to look a little different. That's been advertised on the website. Chip's been involved with that, but there's also some guidelines that Chip has shared, and if you can keep reinforcing those before Halloween, that'd be great, Chip. So thank you for doing that. I wanted to thank Marty and his crew. Got a call on Sunday, backed up sewer down around Lower Lake, around Mill River Brewery. They had clogged sewer, and Marty and the team jumped on that and cleaned it up within an hour. So I know Mill River was very appreciative of the timing. Once again, this was supposed to be a long weekend for Public Works, but they were called out on a Sunday and dealt with it. A beautiful Sunday, I might add. So, and then just curious as to what the council wants to do for commission reports for the November meeting. Obviously, we've had parks, we had planning. Does anyone have a desire for any specific commission to come in for the November meeting? Chip?
Yeah, I was going to say downtown, Maureen would be able to talk about holiday events.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good time.
So Don, can you add that to the November agenda? I think that's all I had. Just one last thank you, Chief, for all your efforts. Really appreciate it. Really like the direction that you presented tonight, so thank you for that. So we'll move on to council reports. We'll start with Chad.
I haven't had a lot, let's go.
Okay, why don't we pass on that?
Let's go in ward order.
Building inspections, I guess there's been a few landowners that were unaware that they don't come back for a revisit. So it's just send them a photo, but the problem is it said your appointment was at, you know, October 9th at 8 a.m. So they had few people, they had the electrician come to talk about the work that they had done, and they had some other people come to talk about the work they had done, and then no one showed, and so they called the city, and they're just like, oh, you just send us photos, and we'll approve or disapprove it. But you just hired an electrician and some other folks to come to your building for an hour.
They've got to do the work.
Yep.
After the initial inspection, and I think as a result of COVID, they're going with, once the work is done, send us photos showing that the work is done.
Yep, I think the paperwork says your appointment is on this date and this time. So I saw the paperwork, it said your appointment's on August 9th at 8 o'clock. But that might have been the due date, but it didn't say due date, it said your appointment. So they were all ready for someone to come back.
I had to check with Matt, but
yeah, no one came back.
I know he goes back to inspect, he has been going back to inspect and make sure the work is completed.
Yeah. So
Can you follow up with that, Marty, in the paperwork?
You just send photos now, I think. I don't think the lights are working on Weldon in Maine anymore for some reason.
The street light?
Yeah, they're working, but they're not sensing. So we must have a solar flare or something, because I don't think the ones in front of Price Chopper are working either anymore. So there's all kinds of them not working. But I'm running low on graffiti removal supplies. I removed some on Lower Weldon, and the PD had bought me some a long time ago, and I'm running low. So I don't know if I can get some more. I can send a photo of what I got.
Sure.
I'll stop doing that. Okay.
The top stuff was really good down at that end of town. And then we're not doing any redistricting, are we? I've had a couple people reach out and said, hey, I've been in Ward 6 for 20 some odd years, and now I've been moved to a different ward.
No, in fact, I think the council has to do it.
So everyone on the east side of Main Street that were once in Ward 6 are now no longer in Ward 6.
Ward
And there's been some of that happening down on Lower Weldon as well. Some folks have been moved from Ward 6 into a different ward down there.
Huh.
And moved on what, the voting checklist?
Yes, so it's like they show up to vote and they're like, I'm in Ward 6, and they're told no, they're not. Because they're an odd or an even number on Main Street, that means that they're in a different ward, but they're like, I've always voted in Ward 6.
Would you mind sending Curry an email, copy me into it? I mean, I can remember that if you like, but I don't have the specifics of it. And I think it'll come better coming from a counselor than me.
Okay. That's all I got.
Can I just dovetail on that? So we received at home, so my house used to be a duplex. I received a ballot for a young woman who lived there 15 years ago. Are there many of those out there? And if I wanted to be a fraudulent voter and fill that ballot out, how does that get approved or disapproved that it's not a real ballot?
I don't have any idea. Yeah, I mean, we could. Yeah, it's unfortunate Curry's not here.
Yeah, she has a process for checking the voter rolls, and she probably could give you some insight into what she would.
I mean, she's all over the credibility of the checklist, and has been doing a lot of active management of it. And that might be why we're seeing some of these things, but both of those seem to be moving in their opposite direction, so.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, the name must be on the checklist if we got a ballot, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And then if I did submit it, how do you prove that that person filled it out or did not? So
Yeah.
I can have that conversation with Curry, but.
Yeah.
Marty?
So I asked Curry the other day because I had another individual ask me a similar question. They had moved to the town, yet they were still registered in the city. And they had registered in the town. And Curry's response was, once they registered in the town, it should go through the state, and the state removes them from our checklist. And so I'm not sure if this individual you're talking about has moved out of state and how that is handled if they register in another state. But
As far as I know, she did move out of state. I think she moved to the West Coast, but,
so the BCA gets together, I think on a yearly basis to purge the checklist.
Yeah.
But on that situation like that, I'm not sure how that would.
Have they met?
There's a cycle that happens in purging, but obviously be able to get after a certain number of times where they didn't vote, you would then send them a letter, and if you don't get a response there, you're able to purge them. But there's a process that the BCA goes through.
okay. I'll touch base with her. Marie?
I just want to thank Marty for taking care of a couple of situations that needed addressing. The tree I noticed was trimmed up on Elm Street, and I'm sure Maureen is very grateful. I haven't had a chance to talk to her, but I'm sure she appreciates it. And also the green belt situation on LaSalle. I mean, Marty got right on that right off, so I really appreciate that. And yeah, do a good job.
Tim?
Stanley Court.
Yes.
So, why does a resident on Stanley Court have to put up with not being able to use his or her driveway, or having to walk through mud to get to their house because of a development that's going on down there?
They don't.
Okay.
There's an approved building lot at the bottom of Stanley Court that has received a building permit, and they're in a construction mode, so you're going to have construction vehicles in and out of there. Both times that I've been down there previous to construction starting and met with the developer and the homeowner, they were parked in front of their lot and allowed both residents on each side ample access in and out of their driveway. When they connected the water line to this lot, they went through a neighbor's driveway in order to hook onto the water line, which was within the right of way. Dave Southwick and I went down and met with that individual, and she told us in no uncertain terms that she did not want to speak to us, and we would be hearing from her attorney. At which point we said, very good, thank you, and left. We offered to pave the section of driveway that was disturbed, and there's a curb stop in her driveway that was buried, that was found upon them excavating to connect their water line to the new lot. So that contractor at the time, we gave them a new curb stop, and he raised it. Had that resident ever needed her water shut off, we wouldn't have been able to shut it off. We would have had to shut the main off at the top of Stanley. Throughout the system, in the city and town, there are curb stops and driveways. She felt this was unprecedented, and she was not going to have her curb stop in her driveway. And that curb stop was put in when the water was installed at that house probably 50 years ago. So we have not made any other, or I have not made any other correspondence. I'm waiting to hear from her attorney.
Okay, that's all I have. I'm not him, by the way.
I was gonna ask that question.
This wasn't an asking for a friend situation?
This was asking on behalf of a Ward 1 resident.
Constituent. Mike?
Things are pretty good up in Ward 4. I did want to acknowledge that it's Indigenous Peoples Day and appreciate everybody working on the holiday.
Okay.
I don't have anything.
Okay. Tom, any last words?
Nope.
Okay, let's move on to approval of minutes from 9/14.
Motion to approve minutes 9/14/20.
Second.
Second by Kate. Any corrections, amendments, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye to approving the minutes.
Aye.
Any opposition?
Abstention.
Abstentions, Chad and Tim.
Chad, it has you as being
I came in late.
late. Okay.
Yep. I came in at the very tail end of Bernie's out on the beach.
Minutes are approved.
Motion to approve warrants 10-120.
Second.
Second by Chad, motion by Tim. Any comments, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We've got 2 ayes. There, and third,
Oh, aye. Sorry.
keep you on your toes. Motion approved. And entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Motion by Mike, seconded by Chad. Thank you all. Thank you staff for being here. Appreciate it. So I would just remind everyone, if you have questions for that interview process, please forward them to Don.